Hello, Chris here, Green Sabre. Okay, the time has come. It's video time. Now, I promised this several weeks ago now, I think. But I'm finally getting round to it. So, I've kind of done this the wrong way around. What I should have promised first was the Numb EP, little kind of a video to just let you know what the inspiration was behind that and so on and so forth. But because I promised this, the music that inspired Green Sabre video first, then that's what we're going with. So that one can come at a later date, so watch this space. But first, yeah, I'd just like to give a few shout outs. Now, firstly, Liam, the Death Doom Metalhead of also the band Consecration. Big shout out to Liam for giving us a great review and having a great YouTube channel, having a great band, and just, yeah, big shout out. Thank you, Liam, and for giving me the inspiration to sort of do this as well. So, nice one, Liam. Thanks a lot. And John as well, who's Rock and Metal Plus, his YouTube channel. Again, really nice review of the stuff. Great guy is John. So, yeah, a big thumbs up, and thank you for appreciating what it is that what we do. So, without further ado, there's probably people I've forgotten there as well, but I'll get to further shout-outs on the next video. Yes, without further ado, the music that inspired Green Sabre. So, a lot of Doom stuff, as you can imagine. And what I'll mention first is a band that I think most of you will be able to hear in our sound. And they're a big deal for us. And that is currently, you see that, Yob. Now, I've picked this one, Clearing the Path to Ascend, as the particular one. We love all of Yob's stuff, to be honest, but this is the one that really captures, I think, what they're best at. Basically, sorry, let me just chuck that over there. Don't mind the rattling, ignore me. Yeah, I think that album sort of clearly defines what they're great at. It's got the crushingly heavy moments, as well as that melody. And it was something when I put together the idea of doing Green Sabre, it was more out of I felt that there was a need. I wanted to hear a certain kind of music, which I've since learned is out there. But at the time, thought, no one's really doing this, so I'm going to do it instead. And there was only really Yob that were pushing all those buttons. I've since, as I say, heard other bands doing this as well. But Yob really stood out as if that is really what I wanted us to sort of try and emulate, if you would. And yeah, like having seen Yob live twice recently. I saw them in Leeds just before the Desert Fest last year, and saw them at Desert Fest last year, and fucking hell, I mean, that was a masterclass in heaviness. You can tell straight away when you see a band that are real masters of their craft, and if you ever get the chance to see Yob, do so, because they are the pioneers. Moving on, another band that are currently working. I wouldn't say a modern band, because much like Yob, they've been going for years, but they're still sort of at it now, and a big deal for us is Electric Wizard. Now, I would say that their sound isn't immediately obvious in what we do, but they're a big influence, that kind of sludgy, grinding, doomy stoner heaviness that they do. And yeah, obviously, this one's a major milestone for us. However, I like the newer stuff as well, or the more recent stuff. This is going back some years now, but I think, obviously, Come My Fanatics, and the earlier stuff, obviously, yeah, great. But I think that they've still got a relevance, and I like how their sound has evolved. As I say, not an immediate influence that you would notice in our stuff. Although some of the newer tracks, you might notice a bit more of a sort of sludgier feel at times. Yeah, but a big influence on us. So, yeah, I would say Electric Wizard, Yob are the two current Doom pioneers that are a massive influence on what we do sound-wise. Moving on from that, I'm going to start now getting into, I'll dive in and out. I feel like I've done this kind of countdown, if you will, to the best of my ability to try and capture and let them all interconnect and so on, but there's a few tangents here and there. But what I'm going to do now is go back to one of the bands that I know, for me and Gaz in particular, they were a massive light bulb moment when we first heard this stuff back in the early 90s. Gaz was a massive fan. As you will realise as I continue to explain, and any of you that know Gaz from the band, he's a bit of an encyclopedia for this stuff. A lot of what I've got into that has shaped what I love musically has come directly from Gaz. He's a massive influence on everyone around us sound. He just kind of knows all this obscure stuff. And I say obscure stuff, it's probably not that obscure now, but it was back then. But moving on was this band. Now, I don't know if you can see that. Can I try and avoid the glare? Yeah, that's a bit better. Trouble. I could take it out of its little sleeve here, but it's got a fancy shiny sleeve, so I don't think that makes a massive difference. But Trouble, massive band for us. They were kind of... Gaz put me onto them, like I was saying. It was this self-titled album and the Manic Frustration album, which resonated most with me. I've since really got into all of their stuff, really. Psalm 9, The Skull, Plastic Green Head, all the Wagner stuff, really. Yeah, and... yeah, huge. They had that kind of groove to them, but it was doomy and it had a heaviness, and it was that I latched on to. I'd started hearing I'd got into other doom stuff before Trouble, but it was hearing that groove that really got me, and leading from Trouble. Again, probably not a band that you can hear a massive amount of influence in our stuff, but they are a massive influence. That goes without saying. And through listening to Trouble, and yes, it was this way around, got me into this band. And obviously, if you're a doom band, then this band will always be a major influence. That just goes without saying. I've picked out these two in particular, Master of Reality and Paranoid, because they're my two favourites. The lads might have others, but I've pulled rank on them and just decided that but I think those two really cover what's great and heavy and yeah, everything about Sabbath. I mean, obviously, they did some great stuff post-Aussie. Mob Rules, various other things, Heaven and Hell, which are great records, but it's the Aussie era, really, and Master of Reality, which is probably my favourite if I had to pick one, that really cemented that kind of doomy sound. Now, the reason I mentioned that I'd gone the wrong way around it, I got into Trouble before I got into Sabbath, because I got into metal late 80s, 87, 88, around then. So it was all Iron Maiden, and then I moved on to Metallica and Slayer. So I missed Sabbath. I bypassed them as such. Everyone talked about them, but it wasn't until I heard Trouble that something clicked. Again, the light bulb moment, that I then started delving back into Sabbath, and yeah, that was a real eye-opener. So yeah, Trouble, Sabbath, big influences. Maybe, I mean, Sabbath, obviously, you can, any self-respecting doom band just spends most of their time trying to sound like Sabbath anyway. But now, this is where I go off on a tangent slightly. A big influence on me entirely. I can't really vouch for the rest of the band, and I don't know whether you can hear it, but I was listening to, when we were in the studio recording the Numb EP, I was listening to a lot of this band. Now, if you don't know this band, that won't really help you. Anyway, Sun. This is the black one. I was hammering Sun at the time that we were in the studio, and that there's the intro track, the Desolate. Remember what it's called? Yeah, the intro track on the Numb EP that was my little homage to Sun, and that kind of bludgeoning soundscapeness that they create is something that had a big effect on me. Again, apart from that intro on the demo, it's probably not something that you can... We've got drums for a start, but it's probably not something you can hear any major influences on. But yeah, Sun, I still listen to them quite a lot now. I've got to be in the right frame of mind. It's not just something you can whack on to go and work out to, or road trip or so on. You've got to be in the right... But, yeah, a big... just totally unique. What they do is an acquired taste, but, yeah, big influence on me. And that sound. I wish I could recreate that sound. But, yeah, big influence. Now, more of a big influence of what you probably can hear, and that is this band. Huge influence. Me and the bass player Rossi in particular. This was Rossi's pick when I asked the lads to sort of compile a few albums. This was his pick. It would have been my pick as well. I went for this one though, which is so close to... I think Wish You Were Here might be my favourite. But this one's a very close second for me. And Pink Floyd are a huge influence. Now, I think if you listen to our stuff, that's fairly obvious. I think you can hear it. Just restack these. There we go. Yeah, I think you can really hear the Pink Floyd influence, personally. Whether you think that is a moot point, because I'm about to explain why there's such a big... I got into Pink Floyd through my dad. They were a band that my dad loved, and so his records at home, you'd start sort of spinning stuff and all that, and it was all... I love the massiveness of it, the epicness of what they did, and how they construct that album, and the subject matter as well. Again, I'll go into this in greater detail on the next video, but the Numb EP is essentially about loss. It's a concept album about loss and how you deal successfully and unsuccessfully with that process. And that I kind of did that with a clear view of Pink Floyd in mind, of having this concept of what I wanted to run with for the whole thing. Now, musically, they're a big influence as well, because of that hugeness, that epicness that I wanted to try and convey. I remember saying when I put it together that I wanted to be like a super heavy Black Sabbath meets Pink Floyd meets Cathedral. That's what I wanted to go with. I feel I sort of accomplished that, really. But, yeah, Pink Floyd, a massive influence on me. Dave Gilmour as well as a guitarist. He's one of my favourite guitarists. Because it sounds like he's not doing very much. Just like he bends a note for sort of 10 minutes at a time. But there's so much more to it. It's entirely feel. And that's important to me in this whole writing doom metal process. If there's no feel there, then you're absolutely wasting your time. And if you notice on the demo, my solos are pure Gilmour. I mean, pound shop Gilmour, I admit. But, yeah, they just... that's who I'm trying to channel. I wanted something that's all feel, that technically isn't very proficient, because, as you can probably gather, I'm not a very technically proficient guitarist. I concentrate on rhythm, and rhythm's what I'll do. But in this instance, I knew that I wanted solos, so I just channeled my inner Gilmour. And if what I achieved is a fraction of what he can do, then, yeah. And in particular, the outro to Pigs on the Animal album, with that solo, that is what I was going for. So Pink Floyd may surprise a few of you. Huge influence on us. Now I'm digressing ever so slightly here. Other influences which clearly won't be apparent a lot of the time, but bands that were big to us. Now, I don't have the vinyl to show you, so straight off the bat, I'll think Crowbar. Big influence on us. And when you hear one of the new songs that we're working on, might be a year yet, don't worry, we're just very slowly piecing it together and looking at going in the studio in the next couple of months to get the next stuff together. But one of them's got a real Crowbar vibe, and they're a big band to us, which leads me on to Down as well. I know that, again, Rossi, the bass player, big fan of Down, and they're a big influence on his stylings and stuff. This record, massive influence on all of us. And this band, the Blind album as well, I would say is right up there. But this really is Corrosion in full pomp. Yeah, they just, big influence on us that. Again, probably not the most obvious influence, but nor is this one. but a huge influence. And I'm hoping that vocally we will, well, never recreate Lane Staley by any stretch, but I'm hoping that vocally we're just a little more room for a bit of harmonising and just creating those vocal levels that, I don't care what anyone says, that's a Doom album. This is a Doom record. It's fucking miserable. But, wow, yeah, outstanding record. Other bands, My Bloody Valentine, particularly the Loveless album, a big effect on me. I love that record, and it's just, I would like to have an element of, pardon me, shoegaze. Sort of brought in Deftones as well, I would say, is where I've got my fan of that kind of shoegazy vibe. So they're a big thing. Tool. I know that Rossi will not forgive me if I don't mention it, but one of Rossi's biggest influences, Tool. And yeah, but I would say, yeah, more so the probably biggest influence of that you can't hear in us, Sisters of Mercy. Me and Gaz in particular, I think all of us to a point, but me and Gaz in particular kind of, yeah, we liked the whole goth thing when we were younger. And I remember having a CD of the Slight Case of Overbombing. I haven't got it with me now. And that, yeah, I loved some of the classic Sisters stuff, which is going to lead me now into the top 5. I'm saying 5. Let me have a look. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, the top 5. Now, these are the main influences, the biggest influences on what we do. And let me just consult my notes because I don't want to miss out any particular... Oh, I'll tell you who I did miss from those out. Life of Agony, and that was Brian's choice. Brian was a big fan of Sal, the drummer Sal Abriscato, and loved what he did with that. And that was a doomer, that particularly that River Runs Red, but although I really liked Ugly, the second album as well. Again, I've only got them on CD, and my CDs are packed in the loft somewhere, and I can't for the fucking life of me find them. But yeah, big influence on us, those, particularly the first album, more so, even though I really like the second one, the River Runs Red album, yeah, big influence on all of us. That really resonated with us. And yeah, I know that Bry was a massive fan of Sal's drumming, just what he used to, the little complexities that he throw in there, that if you're not a drummer, yeah, it was a lot of it, how Bry explains it, is over my head. But yeah, made a big deal on him, which leads to our number 5 choice of biggest Green Sabre musical influences. Type O Negative. Now, this album was just a jaw dropper for me. Again, Gaz put me onto these. I remember we were going to a gig. Me and Gaz used to go to gigs in Bradford and Manchester every other weekend. We'd be at Rio's in Bradford, Queen's Hall in Bradford, International 2 in Manchester, Academy, you name it, we were over there. And I can't remember what we were going to see, but Gaz put that on tape in the car, and it was just like, what the fuck is this? It had, as I just mentioned, Sisters of Mercy before, it had that gothiness to it, but it also had a groovy kind of down, it had that sort of groove to it as well, but a massive doominess to it as well. And I was just, I mean, as a lot of you, I imagine, with that band, I was just hooked. They were, let me just consult my notes, because there's something that, no, the note just says that we'd hammer this in the car on the way to gigs, and we generally did. That was one of our albums where I don't think it was off I had it on CD back at the time. This is a silver vinyl repress or something like that. But yeah, I think I played it almost constantly for a year. Yeah, it was never off my CD player. And then when they redid it as well, the digipack that had Suspended in Dusk on it, it was a doomier version of the album. They took the fast songs off. And yeah, that was one of my... It is one of my favourite albums of all time. But this one is probably my favourite. If I had to pick a favourite Type O Negative record, October Rust. And I have to get this in. This is an original pressing. It cost me a fucking fortune. But anyway, yeah, October Rust. I remember at the peak of my smoking days, I would spend most of it absolutely fucking hammered, listening to that back to back and playing Mickey Mouse's Castle of Illusion on the Mega Drive or whatever it was. And yeah, Typo were my life from like 94 through 90. When it's October of 96. Yeah, yeah, through there, just, yeah, they were everything. And you can probably hear in our stuff are a massive, massive influence because they've got all those kind of sensibilities. And what I liked about them was that they didn't take themselves too seriously, which is an admirable thing in this line of stuff. But yeah, for major sound influences, and I'd be surprised if you can't hear them in our stuff, Typo were a big influence. Which moves on to number 4. Now, number 4 and number 3 are virtually the same place. So I will say tied at number 3. But this band. Don't know if you can see that because of the glare. Gothic. Paradise Lost. Damnation tag there. This was the first metal album that I obsessed over. Now, might be a bit of a lie. I probably obsessed over Master of Puppets and Ride the Lightning. But this band I obsessed over because it was just so unique. They were towards the tail end of touring this record when I got into them. So it'll have been like back end of 91, early 92 that I started really hammering Paradise Lost. And Gregor was a life changer for my guitar. I'd listened to Gregor's guitar style, and no offense to Gregor, because for me he's one of the greatest guitarists out there. But he had a style which to me, I thought, I can do that. That doesn't sound too hard to replicate, but what he's doing is fantastic. He had this just the harmonies, it was that harmonising over a heavy riff that he does that would changed everything for me. I moved from wanting to be like a thrash guitarist to a doomer, and it was Paradise Lost that kind of tipped me over on that one. And yeah, the Gothic album, but Lost Paradise as well. Shades of God, Icon, Draconian Times I love, I should say. But I kind of was just, I don't know what it was musically at the time, but I was just losing. So Draconian Times I don't really know that well, because it's not something that I ever really, I started listening to other stuff at the time, for reasons unknown. But Gothic, Lost Paradise, Shades of God, Icon to a point as well, were the big, massive, massive ones for me. And then I put this album up there with it as well. Now these are a massive influence on us, and you can likely hear it. And in particular, this first album, and the Crestfallen EP, and the demo. Was it All Faith Is Lost, is it called? The cassette that had like a angel statue or something on the front of it. Anathema were a bit, because it was grindingly heavy, but super, super melodic. More melodic than a lot of doom bands were doing. It had such high melody in there, and a real attention to detail with that melody as well. And it was so almost over the top, mournful and sorrowful, but absolutely, it ticked all the boxes for us. And we used to saw Anathema a couple of times. This has got a little side story I'm going to tell you now. I saw Anathema a few times, and we would often bump into Danny outside of gigs, be it at Bradford mainly, but I remember seeing him at the Alice in Chains gig when they were on the Dirt Tour at the Academy in Manchester. But usually we'd see him outside of various death metal, doom metal gigs at either the Queen's Hall or the Rios in Bradford. He'd always be there, and absolute salt of the earth guy. He'd always have time for you, and just a genuinely nice bloke. And Anathema were demoing at the time. I remember him mentioning that they were gonna, I think we did go to that gig, I forget who it was the first time that we saw him. The second or third time that we saw him live was at the Rios, and they were support to Cannibal Corpse, which isn't the most obvious support act. Really good night though was that. But and in particular, if anyone was there at that night that Cannibal Corpse played the Rios in Bradford with Anathema as support, will remember at one point Chris Barnes mid grunt growl. All of a sudden, absolute silence because our drummer Brian had got hammered at that particular gig, had got himself onto stage to stage dive, figured at that moment mid song that was the time to go up to the drummer and attempt to shake his hand. Was ushered from the stage swiftly, shall we say. So as he went to dive off at the front, got the microphone cable wrapped around his leg. So when he dived off, yes, Chris Barnes is mid-grunt and out goes the fucking microphone into the crowd somewhere. I think it's a good 2 minutes of just the music carried on, but no vocals because they're trying to retrieve the fucking microphone from the crowd floor. Anyway, they get it back on. I remember that somebody did a bootleg of that I heard on cassette where Chris Barnes goes, "It's working," or somewhat two words to that, where he gets the microphone back. But yeah, that was our drummer Brian that did that. So if you were at that gig, and I've often wondered, who was that fucking arsehole that spoiled whichever song it was they were playing at the time? Our drummer Brian. So thank him on the comments. What number was I on there? Three. Number 2. The number 2 biggest influence for us. And in particular, I mean, all their records are good, quite honestly. I don't think they've done a bad album. And I'm even counting 0.35278%, whatever it is. They've not done a bad record. But this one, holy fuck. As the Flower Withers as well. Big influence on us. And it was that, actually, yes, that's what I need to say. It was that, As the Flower Withers, that got me moving from death metal to doom metal, because that was a really good mix of the two. But for me, they absolutely fucking nailed proper British doom on this record. There isn't a bad track on this album, and I can still listen to it today as excitedly as I did back then in 1993, when it came out. Just a breathtaking piece of work and a big influence on us. We don't have a keyboard player and a violin player. Did a few samples on the demo, just for atmosphere. But yeah, huge influence. Seen them 2 or 3 times as well. Looking forward, they're on at Damnation this year, and I can't wait for that, because it was the Turn Loose the Swans tour that was the last time that I saw them. They played at the Rios in Bradford, and it was either Pitch Shifter or GGFH, or maybe both of them. I feel like Pitch Shifter were there, but I'm sure GGFH were on that as well. Anyway, whoever it was. That was the last time I saw them, and they were stunning that night. Yeah, just breathtaking. And I probably, even though that was number 2, I would say My Dying Bride are the biggest influence on our sound in reality. So they probably should be number 1. But the reason that they're not number 1 is because I've picked an album that changed everything for me. And if I was forced at gunpoint to pick a best album ever for me, it would be this one that I'm about to show you. The biggest influence on us as a band. Cathedral. In particular, this album, the Forest of Equilibrium album. I love everything about this record. The artwork, the guitar sound, the songs, the atmosphere, the vocal style on it. I think I don't have a problem with a lot of the ooh yes and come on nows and all that Lee Dorian went on to do. I like all of that stuff. But for me, his vocal style on that album is really nailed on, and it works perfectly with that music. This album, and it changed my life. I've been a Doomhead since. Essentially, we'd been to watch Morbid Angel. I think it was on the Blessed Are the Sick tour European Sickness or whatever it was. We'd been to see them at the international tour in Manchester, and support came from Sadus and an opening band called Cathedral. I had no fucking idea who Cathedral were at the time. I was just getting into uber fast speedy death metal at the time, so I was there for Morbid Angel. I'd heard that Sadus were quite good. Cathedral came on to rapturous applause. I'm like, are they local? I was like, I've never heard of this fucking band. Who are they? And came on and played the slowest, heaviest set I've ever heard. And at the time, that was like May 1991, I believe. At the time, I couldn't get my head around it. I was just like, I don't understand. Is it going to get going at any point, this stuff? And it was just so brutally heavy, though. And it wasn't until after the event that we got home that one of the lads that we'd been with really was like, I thought they were the best band on the night. And he went out and he bought, I think he'd been to some record shop in Athlex in Manchester or something. And he bought, I think it was a boot even of the In Memoriam demo. And we used to go around to his place. My first ever band called Necromania was with this lad and a couple of others. And we used to rehearse in his bedroom at the top of a pub in Morecambe. We never did any live gigs. We just used to... And yeah, anyway, we listened to that In Memoriam demo to death, and it clicked. And I have never looked back since. It was just with the Ebony Tears on there and Morning of a New Day. Well, once this came out, I went out to get it, and just a life changer because they'd refined that sound. And it's the whole package for me. You know, the Dave Patchett artwork is fucking phenomenal, and it works so well with the album. I can get lost in this record, and I go through a 2-year cycle. Every fucking 2 years, I am back here listening to this album to death. Just every time. So it goes without saying that they are a huge, huge influence. And the next record, the Soul Sacrifice EP, I saw them on this Gods of Grind tour as well, and you could tell they were getting faster and groovier, but they were fucking phenomenal that night as well. And yeah, they were just enormous influence. And yeah, it changed my life because I've been a Doomhead since, like I say, it was May 1991 that we saw him in Manchester, and then that week afterwards, my mate had gone out and bought the EP, and then we just, for the next month or two, just killed it. Listened to nothing else but that. We're around every night. Stick Cathedral demo on again, and it would inspire us to play in that fucking terrible band that we used to have called Necromania, which I will get onto in greater detail at the next video, which will be about the Numb EP and so on. But yeah, I'll wrap that up. I appreciate that I probably rattled through that very, very fast. So you might want to go back and rewatch a few bits a few times if you can bear to do that, just to get a few of the details. But that is the music that's inspired Green Sabre. I'm glad that I got that off my chest in some ways. But yeah, there's probably stuff I've forgotten, but they're the big ones. And that top 5 in particular: Type O Negative, Paradise Lost, Anathema, My Dying Bride, Cathedral. They're the biggest influences. Outside of that, probably Black Sabbath and Pink Floyd, I would say, are the other major influences on what we do. But I'll stop fucking waffling now. Now, what's the protocol with YouTube? Am I supposed to say, hey, like and subscribe? Check out the links in my detail. I'll link to Liam, Death Doom Metalhead. Again, big thumbs up. Thank you, Liam. John, Rock and Metal Plus. Thank you again, John. I'll link to them. So if you don't know about them, which I'm sure you will, give them a look. And Rob Hammer. Rob Hammer, Doom Channel, gave us a really nice review when the demo come out. So if I ever meet you, Rob, thank you. And that's it. Stay tuned. I'm not going to be doing a video every week because it's taking me long enough to do this. I can't really be arsed at the minute, but I will. The next one, again, might be about a fortnight away, will be the Numb EP and how it came to pass. So until then, thank you for watching. I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.